I'm starting with something that sounds completely wrong. Why would you ever create enemies and when life is already complicated enough? Most people spend their time doing the opposite, avoiding conflict, trying to be liked, keeping things neutral. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you have no enemies, you probably have no real power either, because power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in contrast, in tension, in opposition, in resistance. And this is something Machiavellian thinking understands deeply. Think about it like this. If everyone agrees with you, if no one challenges you, if no one resists you, then what are you really standing for? Nothing, because the moment you take a clear position, you automatically create opposition. And that's not a problem, that's a sign that you're no longer invisible. Now, this doesn't mean going around creating chaos or unnecessary conflict. That would be reckless. Machiavellian strategy is not about being emotional, it's about being intentional. So when we talk about creating enemies, we're really talking about something deeper, defining your position so clearly that opposition becomes inevitable. Let's break this down. Most people try to stay in the middle. They soften their opinions. They avoid saying what they really think. They adjust themselves to fit in. Why? Because they want to avoid rejection. But in doing so, they become forgettable. They become neutral. And neutrality has no influence. Now compare that to someone who is clear, not loud, not aggressive, but defined. They have standards, boundaries, opinions they don't dilute. What happens? Some people respect them deeply, others don't like them at all. And that's exactly the point. Because when you create that divide, you create identity. And identity attracts loyalty. Machiavelli understood something most people ignore. It's safer to be respected with some opposition than to be liked by everyone but taken seriously by no one. Because being liked is unstable. It depends on mood, on perception, on constant approval. But being respected, even by those who oppose you, that's more durable. Now let's go deeper. There's a psychological reason why having enemies can actually strengthen your position. Enemies create focus. When someone opposes you, you become sharper, more aware, more strategic, more intentional with your actions. Without resistance, people become lazy, complacent, but with resistance, you evolve. There's also another layer to this. Enemies clarify your environment. They show you who truly supports you, who is neutral, who is against you, and that clarity is powerful because now you're no longer guessing. You're seeing reality as it is. But here's where it becomes strategic. You don't create enemies randomly. You create them by standing for something, by setting boundaries, by saying no when others expect yes, by refusing to conform. And this naturally filters people. Some will align with you, others won't. That's not something you force, it's something you allow. Now let's talk about perception, because how you handle enemies matters more than having them. If you react emotionally, you lose control. If you become defensive, you look weak. But if you remain calm, composed, and unaffected, something interesting happens. Your enemies start to elevate your status because opposition draws attention, and attention creates presence. Think about it. People who have no critics are usually not doing anything significant, but those who are constantly challenged are often the ones influencing something, shifting something, changing something, and people notice that. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They try to eliminate all enemies. They try to fix every disagreement, resolve every conflict, be understood by everyone. But that's not realistic. And more importantly, it's not effective. Because the more you try to please everyone, the more you dilute yourself. Instead, the strategy is different. You accept that opposition is part of the game. You don't chase it, but you don't avoid it either. You become comfortable with it. There's also a deeper psychological advantage. When people see that you're not afraid of having enemies, They treat you differently. They become more careful, more respectful, because they sense something. You're not dependent on approval, and that makes you harder to control. Now let's take this one step further. Sometimes having a visible opposition actually strengthens your position even more. Why? Because people naturally align themselves with sides. They like clarity. They like knowing who stands where, who represents what. And when there's a clear contrast, people choose, they commit, they engage. Without that contrast, everything feels vague, forgettable. But this requires control, because creating enemies without discipline leads to chaos. So here's the balance. You are firm, but not reckless, clear, but not emotional, strategic, not reactive. You don't attack people unnecessarily. You simply don't compromise who you are, and that alone will create enough opposition. Now here's the final layer. The real reason this works has nothing to do with others. It has to do with you. Because when you stop trying to avoid enemies, you stop filtering yourself. You stop shrinking your opinions. You stop second-guessing your actions. And in that moment, you become more aligned, more direct, more powerful. Here's the truth most people won't accept. If everyone likes you, you're playing it too safe. If no one challenges you, you're not doing anything meaningful. But if you have both supporters and opposition, you're in the right place. Because power is not about being universally accepted. It's about being clearly defined, clearly positioned, and strong enough to handle resistance. So don't aim to create enemies for the sake of it. Aim to become someone who is so clear, so grounded, so unfiltered, that opposition becomes inevitable. And when it does, you don't react, you don't retreat, you remain steady, because you understand something most people don't. Enemies don't weaken your position, they reveal it. If you want to understand power, psychology, and human nature on a deeper level, subscribe. Because the moment you stop avoiding the game is the moment you start playing it properly.